Welcome back. We are back. I'm here. I got to squeeze in one more episode before the weekend starts. College football playoff starts tomorrow. NFL's right after that. So Thursday through the whole weekend, I'm going to be basically ignored because, well, rightfully so, the best football we've been waiting for all year long is finally starting. So let me get my yapping out the way now. One topic that seems to be floating around, and it's always very relevant this time of the year, is the discussion if teams, NFL teams specifically, are tanking for draft spots. Honestly, it's a debate that's been going on for years. I've seen both sides of the argument where it makes sense. So I created a list of yes reasons and a list of no reasons. We'll go over some of them, and then at the end, I'll just go ahead and say where I stand on it and what I truly believe, if it's happening, if it's an issue, or if it's something that even needs to be addressed. So I'm gonna start off with the reasons for why it possibly is happening and should be addressed. Irresponsible owners. I think without naming names, like the Jerry Jones situation, let's go ahead and name names. There are irresponsible owners out there. There are. Being a billionaire does not correlate to knowing football, especially the business part of football. Jerry Jones is a great example of that because there's times where you think he's playing stupid or you think he's playing dumb, like when he didn't get Cooper Rush's his money for that contract incentive that we saw this past Sunday. But then there's also 30 years of a Super Bowl gap. So then you may think, yeah, maybe he actually is stupid. Maybe he really doesn't know what he's doing. So I don't necessarily think I see teams tanking based off of that. But from someone who, like Jerry Jones, who seems to often be pushed in the corners and influenced by outside opinions and what he should do, we've seen him now just max out Dak for a second time, and he looked reluctant to do it again. Yeah, I can definitely see someone like him being convinced why it's a good idea to tank. Another example, up in New York with the Jets, with Woody Johnson running that team, and the reports coming out that his 17-year-old son is calling the shots based off of Madden scores. I can see how you can convince a 17-year-old to tank for the season, and if they're doing everything based off of what the 17-year-old says, according to the GM, he has to get everything approved by a teenager. Yeah, I can totally see tanking being a thing. You're willing to pass up Jerry Jeudy because of his Madden rating. I could see you tanking for a draft spot. Reason number 2, bad coaching. Bad coaching is more than just someone who gets out coached. Sometimes it's someone with just bad or selfish intent. So you do see examples of coaches that, like a Bill O'Brien, for an example, right? When he was with Houston, it just seemed like he was on a completely different accord than the entire rest of the roster and even a back office. I don't know why they granted him the GM, but they traded away DeAndre Hopkins in his prime for David Johnson, who was out of his prime. To basically trade away all the weapons that started the whole Deshaun Watson drama where he initially had to ask for a trade. So I do believe, yeah, there are bad coaching out there, and I wouldn't be surprised if one of them were to say, hey, you know what, I got a few years left on my contract. I'll lose this season to try to get some better linemen in the draft. I don't think it's very likely, but I do think it can happen. Another reason number 3, players do get checked out. It's just a real thing at all levels, especially if you're a bad team. It's hard to stay fully locked in all the time. If you're one of those players that are, let's say, competing, you're healthy, you're competing at a high level, but you know your GM is screwing you guys over, or your coach is screwing you guys over, or you have a terrible offense, you have a terrible defense, it's your luck. Things like that where it can cause where you're constantly missing the playoffs. You see it all the time. Players do check out. You've seen it with the 49ers. They've been riding mile high for who knows how, probably they've been pretty Super Bowl competitive, probably we'll say the past 5 years or so, right? The minute that they're not having a good season, you get, instances of players storming off the field because of bad attitudes and stuff like that. It's not something that anybody wants to see, but it's very apparent. I mean, look at George Pickens. He's jogging through routes and stuff like that, disrupting the timing of their offense. It's one of those things you can't ignore. It's there. Again, do I believe that is what's causing teams to perform as bad as they do, where now we think they're tanking? No. But it is a reason that's been brought up, a reason that's been told to me. And honestly, I could see it happen. Not very likely, but it can happen. Reason number 4, this is the one that I think stood out the most to me, because even with the bad coaching, players thing, those points that have been brought up to me that I brought up, I never really fully bought in. But sometimes when there's smoke, there's fire. And when there's allegations, when now coaches are confirming, like Brian Flores, you saw a few years ago with the Dolphins, he came in and said, hey, the Dolphins want a certain draft pick. They said they were going to pay him a little bit more money to lose some games. Do I think that's the first time that's ever happened in the NFL? No. Do I think he's the first coach that's ever gotten that? No. Because we've seen teams that were absolute garbage and the coaches were there for like another 2 years or so. So how common is it? I don't think it's very common. But again, once you start seeing stuff from people who are actually in the league, in these organizations, and they're filing these suits, I mean, again, where there's smoke, there's fire. There is some truth to it. I don't think it's enough to sway the entire league, but I do think there is cases of that happening, And hey, it is what it is. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So for some reason, I don't think that it's a problem. Starting with the first, this past Sunday, if you look, all teams basically that really had a legitimate shot at the number 1 or number 3, the number 1 spot was there to lose, as far as just tanking if it was that easy. And they all went out there and won. So that shows me that the players don't necessarily think the same way the fans may think they do. Another point is these contracts aren't guaranteed. These players aren't guaranteed to be here next year. These coaches aren't guaranteed to be here next year. We've already seen Gerard Mayo, Antonio Pierce fired. We've seen the Titans GM that was just let go. And the regular season just ended. The full season didn't even fully end yet, and it's already happening. So to sit there and say, hey, with no guarantee that I'm going to be here next year, I'm going to go ahead and perform my absolute worst so that way we can possibly get this kid out of college somewhere to solve all of our problems. It doesn't really seem too likely. Another reason is the contract incentives. I spoke a little bit earlier about Cooper Rush not playing enough to get that $500,000. You also see instances like Mike Evans, shout out another future GOAT, got another 1,000-yard season, and it came with a nice incentive. In that same organization, though, you've seen just a few years ago Antonio Brown storm off the field and chuck up the deuce just because he felt like the team was playing games with them, kind of like Jerry Jones allegedly may have done with Cooper Rush. But sometimes these back offices, if they play games, it's like, those incentives, I say all of that to say it means that much. For some of these players, it's hundreds of thousands. For some of these players, it's millions. But those incentives, a lot of times, it's strategically put in place to guarantee a player has to play the full season through. Whether to avoid having to pay if they've been injured or to avoid lack of effort. But we've seen too many examples of how much those player incentives mean to these players to think that they're just coasting the last few weeks of the season. Granted, yes, there are players that are checked out. Maybe they don't have those incentives, whatever. Things do happen. But I think that's enough of a reason for me to at least believe that they're not just out there getting exercise and tanking. The third reason, for me, I don't think that these veterans are betting on rookies. These guys who have worked themselves their whole life, worked very hard to get where they are, the same way we look at some of these players that get hyped in college, they were those guys. They know the adjustment from college to the pro, so they know better than to risk their future on a rookie. Like, even if the original reason I said wasn't a thing. Let's say you were already committed, you had your long-term contract, you're a favorite throughout the team, I still don't think you would be like, I'm gonna bet next season on a rookie. Let's lose. Let's go out there and do as worst as we can, guys, and let's bring that momentum in and have this rookie change it next year. I don't really see it, and I don't think the GMs really fall for the college hype the way the fans do, or at least the casual fan. I'll give you an example. You look at this year's draft, upcoming draft, right? You see guys like Jalen Milroe. If you follow college football closely enough, you know, an amazing athlete. Most people would not say he's an NFL quarterback, if we're just keeping it a stack. I think coming off of Bama's 2 worst seasons in the past decade, on top of ending with losses to unranked teams, that's not if you compare him, because right now he's projected to go number 3 overall quarterback, the number 3 quarterback. If you compared him to other quarterbacks that have went 3 off the board, or the number 3 quarterback off the board, the number 4 quarterback, 5, whatever, he doesn't really compare with none of them. Just being honest. Another example to go into that hype thing, Shedeur Sanders. I'm a Shedeur Sanders fan. I'm a huge Sanders family, Colorado. But man went out there with Giants cleats on because we thought they had the number 1 overall. He said, yeah, I'll be playing with the Giants. His dad, when they thought the Raiders had the number 1, oh yeah, if y'all go ahead, draft my son, And then look what happened. They went out there and got beat bad. They already didn't really play anybody throughout all of college. They never really got to play anybody like that. They definitely didn't play nobody this year. And then when they did, the last game, that last piece of film, they got beat bad. And then the coach that you were just saying, hey, draft my son, he ain't even there. He just got fired. And as much as I love Shedeur, I don't know if he has Prime's athleticism to be able to go out there and wow the scouts at the draft to up his stock. So now you have a scenario where a kid who fans may have been saying, oh, we're going to get Shedeur next year. Or Shedeur, I'm probably chopping up his name again. We're going to get Shedeur next year. He's going to be the number 1 or the number 2, But then the actual GMs and back office people are saying they don't even project him as a first-round quarterback. I don't know what is actually going to happen, but that just is an example of the disconnect between what's going on the organization side and what's going on with the fans, and why sometimes we may think teams are tanking and it's like, no, they just suck. They're out there giving their best effort. That is just a bad team. You know what I mean? You think of the Jets, the Jaguars, the Raiders, the Browns. The Browns is actually not that bad. They do. You can see where the Browns can improve with a few key pieces. But overall speaking, some of these are just really just bad teams. They're not good, and that's the real reason why they're tanking. And then my last final reason is the players that are out there. I know a lot of people this time of the season say, in between the playoffs and the regular season, this is kind of like the boring football, or there's a lot of backup, These guys that you see out there, for a lot of them, this is their second audition. You're seeing guys who we've watched in Hard Knocks who may have barely made their roster. And props to them. They wrote it out, they got to play a season, but now it's towards the end of the season. They're not guaranteed, as we said. They're not sure if they're going to be here, there, anywhere next year. So it's like, hey man, while you are on the film, go out there and get the best film you can while you're on that field. So that way you can negotiate. And when you think of Drew Lock, like we talked about with the Giants winning this past weekend, Drew Lock was third or second? He was a backup that I think got reduced. Who really cares? At the end of the day, Drew Lock was not anybody's starter. He wasn't really on anybody's radar. So what he had to do, go out there, get his best film he can while he was out there. That way this offseason, he can hopefully be a journeyman to someone's organization. So just examples like that, yeah, I think there's definitely arguments for why teams may tank or why tanking might be a problem. You're definitely going to get people that try their hands, try to slip through the cracks. But overall, it's not a league issue. I don't think it's something that we need to move mountains or change any type of rules for. I genuinely believe there are just some bad teams out there. Just some teams, and not even to say it's the players that suck, because at the end of the day, it's elite athletes. They were all that guy in college. Some people just don't play well together. Some people aren't coached well together. Some people just have bad organization, environment, whatever. There's a whole bunch of excuses and reasons. But I don't think it's because of tanking. I think they genuinely just aren't good. But y'all let me know. I could be completely wrong and missing the mark. Let me know in the comments. Most importantly, like, share, subscribe.